Alrighty, let's learn how we can get started working within computer science. A lot of what I'm going to present here will be explained in more detail as the components come up in the course. But let's start by seeing, what is it like to be a student in a computer science course, specifically my course. So it's a fairly typical process. I like to have a little bit of consistency. I'm going to present content to you. You may also read this content, right? So if you're in my class, you'll be part of a presentation, usually with an assignment, with an example to follow along with. But there'll also be notes provided for you. Everything I present will be available for you to read. If you're following my course online, then of course you can always watch this video or another video. Then you're going to get an assignment or an assessment to reinforce the content. You can use the example we did in class as a guide along with the notes. And then when you complete your assessment, you'll hand it in, of course, right? And then typically, not always, but a unit or a module will end with a final assessment or some kind of quiz or test. The course itself will be complete when a final assessment or a final project will be built, something that you build of your own design to sort of summarize all the learning you've done in the course. At any point throughout the course, if you need help or clarification, I'm of course here. That's the whole point, is to help guide you along the learning process. If you're at the school and I'm in the classroom, the presentation will be done by me using a smartboard, using presentation software like you're seeing now, using the programming software. If you're taking this course online or you're catching up because you weren't there that day, then the video that I can put up on YouTube or a PDF or a PowerPoint file can be read to reinforce any material that you weren't live in the classroom for. Assessments will also be presented this way. You can read them on my website and get clarification on anything you need. I encourage students to have a discussion around the topics so that you can help sort of each other to grasp the concept. And of course, you can email me if you have any questions as well, especially for those of you studying online. And then once you complete and hand in an assessment, I will give you feedback on that, but we'll go over that a little bit later in the presentation. Okay, so what are the typical tools of a computer science student in a computer science course? If this was a biology course, I would say your tools would be a microscope, right? Or if it was a chemistry course, I would say something else. Okay, but this is not that kind of science course. Like, what is the tools of a computer science course? Well, as a computer-based course, you'll be using a computing device, okay? We'll simply call it a laptop or a desktop. And of course, you'll be using software, okay, to use that tool. So I'm going to demonstrate what I'm going to recommend with that stuff. There are, of course, tons of options, right? I'm not that specific about which software or which hardware you use, but I'm going to show you the recommendations of what I'll use in the classroom. Okay. So first, to actually view the content, you need to be on my website, right? You need to be on either my online website or my Mr. Walk's website. Both are essentially the same, along with the companion websites like my YouTube page and things like that. So of course, you're going to need a web browser to view that. There are assignments, especially in early computer science units, and of course in later and more advanced computer science units, that might require written material. And so, of course, you need some sort of thing to do that on, either a Microsoft Word or a Notepad or Google Docs, things like that. And of course, you'll also be sometimes making things into Adobe PDF files. So all the free stuff is fine. You don't need to have any specific software for that. If you're here at the school, of course, all that's there for you. But if you're working on your own device, anything is fine. I'm not picky about that. This isn't a design-based course, so all free software is fine. And of course, for programming as well, there are lots of different options for lots of different programming languages. Most of what I always recommend is 100% free, so you can absolutely get it at home. And that's what I'm going to go over here in a second. Okay, if you're in my grade 10 Computer Science 20S course, of course, this is also available for 30 and 40S courses as well. One of the major pieces of software I'd recommend is Visual Studio. Okay, so Visual Studio can be downloaded. So I would just start by Googling download Microsoft Visual Studio, and then download the latest version. Okay, The one I'm presenting here in this presentation may not be the newest one, but always try to get the newest one so that it essentially works best for you. A lot of these softwares also offer sort of legacy versions as well, and that might be more in line with the one that I'm presenting, but I would recommend always the latest version. And of course then install it, which hopefully goes smoothly for you. But if it doesn't, or if you have any issues, feel free to email me and I can help you with that if you're doing this at home. For 30S and 40S computer science courses, since I teach the majority of that course in Java, again, I would recommend a really good Java-based program. So the one I'm going to recommend is called NetBeans. Other good ones include Eclipse, basically about the same in terms of quality. But what I generally use and what I'll be using for the demonstrations is called NetBeans. So again, just Google search download NetBeans. Once again, download the latest version with as much options as possible. It's 100% free, so this shouldn't be a problem. And install it, and you're ready to go. So those would be my major tools. Software itself is constantly changing. So what I present isn't always going to necessarily be the updated version. And some students, especially as you get more advanced in computer science, might have preferences, right? Might prefer a piece of software or even prefer a certain programming language. I'm open to exploring paths. Just if you're going a little too far away from what I'm presenting in class, just check with me to make sure that the concepts that I'm teaching can be demonstrated in the tool that you're using, okay? As well, a lot of what I do is to further your study in computer science. So if you're going to go beyond a high school computer science course and possibly study computer science at a university or a college level, I want to sort of get tools that will get you more advanced and able to do that so that you can, of course, build really cool software and solve problems using computer science. Okay, so let's get on to the potential of what would happen if you had an assignment. How would you complete an assignment? How would you hand it in? Since this is an electronic course. Okay, some of your first assignments or some of your simpler assignments could be just word processor-based stuff, like say you type something up in Word or a text document. That can be handed in just as it is, and we'll go over the specifics of handing in later. But programming files are a little different. They require a process to show the learning. When you write code in a programming environment, how will you demonstrate that you did that for me? Well, one, all code should be turned into a PDF file. You do this to maintain the look and the feel of that code, right? Code has a certain look. It has a certain color, a certain font, a certain style, and I don't want to lose that when I go to grade it because I may not see that you learned it properly. So I want that to maintain the same way it looked when you were making it. And then when the program runs, it's going to look different than code. And so I need you to take screen captures of this, right, so that I can see the finished product running, okay? In later parts of the course, like your final project, this will change to a screen video, so I can actually see a lot more than just a picture of it, but actually see it actually running. Then, of course, you're going to have these files, PDF files, and then you're going to name them, so I know they're yours, and we'll go over that in a minute, and then hand them in. They can be handed in separately or together, and again, we'll go over that more in detail in a second. What this gives me is the ability to see the development process. I saw the code and the completed solution, the running program. And this will properly allow me to measure and assess you for what you did in terms of that concept. And I don't want to get lost in not seeing what you learned. So there's a bit of a process there for this. So printing your code to a PDF, we'll start with Visual Studio, okay? So here in this PowerPoint slide, you can see that I say you print your code to a PDF, and then you can copy and paste your code into Word, or et cetera. But anyways, I'm just going to show this live right here, right now. So here's Visual Studio, and again, I know this is early in the course and you haven't seen any of this yet, but you build something, you've written some code, and you want to hand this in. So you're going to be going to File Print, and essentially print this code, but not to a real printer. Instead, you're going to switch to something like Print to PDF, which will then ask you, okay, well, what do I call this file? So, for example, code, and then save it. Okay. As well, you're also going to take your program and run it so that I can see that it works. And you're going to take what's called a screen capture of this, which we'll go over in a minute. We'll start first with the code. Here you can see, oops, here you can't see until I jump over there. Let's just turn that off for a second. Here's the PDF, and here's the code just as it looked back here. So it maintains, for example, this blue color and these indents and all that stuff. It's all laid out the same way there. Okay, so, and that's really important. Okay. Now, if you're using NetBeans, it's a similar process. You're also going to go File, Print, but there is a couple of little option changes you have to make at the beginning. This only needs to be done once, and then it saves that as part of the program. But a couple options here that are laid out on the screen here, and I'm just going to show you this live as well, right in NetBeans. So here again is a program in NetBeans. Again, we'll go over all the details of this when we get to this in that part. But you'll have some code up, and you're going to go to File and Print. But if you look here, you can see that the actual look of it is not quite the same as it appears here on the screen. So to fix that, and again, this only has to be done once, you go to Print Options, you uncheck a border. You don't need a border or a header or a footer. That'll get rid of those up there. So you don't need those headers and footers and borders. And then the other option you check is Print as an Editor, so that it maintains the look, the colors, and things like that. And I'm also going to recommend this option here, Fit Width to one page. Not fit height, but fit width. And that way it just fits nicely into the screen here. And then you'll print, and then again switch to Print to PDF. It'll ask you for a name for it, code 2, and then I'll save that as well. Okay, and so here you can see that also maintained the same look and feel as the previous one. So that's really important, getting the code to print properly. Now that your code's prepared, you got to take what's called a screen capture of the running program. Depending on the course, I might define exactly what I want for the screen capture, but in grade 11 and 12 courses, it's part of your mark for you to decide what screen captures to take to prove that your solution worked. So you decide, do I take one screen capture or two, or however many you feel you need to show me that it worked. Okay? This can be done by pressing Alt Print Screen on most systems. Of course, it's different on a Mac. Sometimes you have to hold down a function key, depending on laptops and stuff like that, to take a picture of the active window. And then these pictures are put into memory in the clipboard. It can then be pasted into Word or a PDF document. It can be the same one that you put your code in, or you can create a separate one for your screen captures itself. You can also use software like I've listed here. Snipping tools and etc. could be built into your computer, or you can download a lot of them for free. You don't need to edit your images. You don't need to take them into something like a Photoshop or anything like that. All I need is a demonstration that it's working. Okay? But general rule of thumb I usually say to students is you can never take too many screenshots, but you might be taking too few to prove that your solution works. Okay? And I wouldn't want that to affect your mark. And you can always ask me if you're not sure. I'm just going to show that real quick as well, starting in Visual Studio. So what you would do, and what I'll also do is I'm just going to run Microsoft Word here in the background as well. One thing I mentioned about Visual Studio that's not an option for NetBeans is in Visual Studio you can just copy and paste your code into Word, and it does maintain the look. That's because both programs are made by Microsoft. Or you can just print it to a PDF. Now, to make the screen capture, I'm going to run this program. So here's a little thing of it running. And I'm going to hold Alt and press Print Screen. That should grab it. And then hit Paste. And it didn't grab it, so let's jump back there and do that again. Alt, Print Screen. And it's having some trouble with that. I think there's some weird software running on here that I'm just going to close there for a second. All right, let's try that again. Alt, Print Screen. And then paste. There we go. And similarly, if I was writing here in NetBeans, and I'm just going to add a real quick thing to make something simple. My apologies, it's running a little sluggish. Let me just pause this for 1 sec. Okay, let's try this again. So I'm going to run this here in NetBeans. And here as well, I see a little output window, so I'm going to take a screen capture of that. And this time I'm going to put it right into the PDF. So here's the PDF, and I'm going to hit paste. And there it is. Actually, that's the one from the other one, so let's try that again. Here we go. Run this. One more time. Take a picture of that, paste it in there. Okay. Sometimes in NetBeans as well, you're going to have so many things running. You're going to have a little output down here as well that you might need to take a screen capture of. And again, you could do the same thing. Just take a picture of that and paste that in there as well. Sometimes it gets a little big. You might have to resize it, but you don't have to edit it, right? You can see here. So there. Now I have my code and my screen captures. And if I was working in Visual Studio, I'd have a similar thing where I'd have the code and the screen captures. And they might need a little resizing. That, again, I wouldn't worry too much about that. But this gives me everything I need to mark your program. I can see the code. I can see the finished program running. I've got everything I need. This will also be covered in way more detail once we get to that part of the course, okay? But that's the general process, okay? Once you have this code and screen capture, which might be one or more files, okay, you need to save them or rename them with a name that's relevant. The name should include your name and the name of the assignment. So you notice when I saved it, I just called it code. That's not good enough. You can't hand it in like that. I need it to be something that has your first and last name and then the name of the assignment, okay? So, for example, this file here, this Word file, if I was to properly save this for handing it in, I should call it something that makes a lot more sense. So I would call it something like Lawrence Walks intro program. So I know it's mine, okay? I know when I hand it in that I know my instructor knows which one thing it is. If I've already saved it and I think, oh, okay, well, it's already been saved, then maybe what I need to do is rename it before handing it in. So I'd right click, rename Mr. Walks Intro Java, right? Although maybe I wouldn't call myself a Mr. Walks when, just like I wouldn't expect you guys to. Okay, so here you can see now I have this file and this file. They're ready to be handed in because they have the name on there, so I know whose it is, and they have what it is for me to hand in. So that's really important. Okay. Finally, I think it's important for me to say that what I've been presenting to you, it might be a lot right here at first. It's going to be gone over again once we get to our first assignments. But if at any point in the course you feel you need help, you're falling behind, you need clarification, do not hesitate to contact me. You can always do this through email, especially if you're taking this course online, or if you're in my class, just call me over. If you're in the school, you can come in for any extra time before school. Usually I get here around 7:15 to 8:30. Most lunch hours, unless I have an appointment. And even after school, as long as I have about a day's notice. I have to get some arrangements for my son to get picked up from the bus, but I can also stay after school as long as you give me a day's notice. And help each other as well. As long as you're submitting your own work, help is absolutely something you can get at any point along the process. Okay,